good afternoon. Our first poll is popping right up, so you should grab your phones and start clicking. Excellent. So what percentage of the population does Gen Z take up? And 22% say 39 to 69. And we have another poll question. How old are the oldest millennials? 61% got this right. 42 are the oldest millennials. So I'm right there in that category, although I've always felt like I identified a little bit more with the next generation. So we're gonna have our panelists come up here as soon as they get mic'd up, but we're gonna talk today about Gen Z and who Gen Z is. And something that's really interesting about Gen Z is not only do we call them Zoomers, but they represent 140 billion in spending power, 140 billion. So it's a lot of money and dollars that are gonna be in the market with Gen Z that are already there, with the oldest age being 26 roughly of Gen Z and the youngest being 11. So some of you probably have some Gen Zers at home and are raising them. So I'm really excited to turn it over to our panelists. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves today, but before we do that, I'll quickly say I'm Amanda Lucey, the CEO of the partnership. We are a marketing and brand communications agency that does a lot of ag communications and marketing across the country, and we have 2 offices, one in Atlanta and one in Naples, Florida. And I'm really excited to be here with these fabulous ladies today who have a wealth of experience and varying backgrounds, and I'm gonna turn it over to them. Do you have the clicker?
I do not.
I don't see the clicker. But we do have slides, so maybe we can cue those up, and then meanwhile, we can search for the clicker. Is this it?
Yeah.
This looks more like I'm gonna detonate something. Okay, all right, cool.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here. I'm Roxi Beck. I'm the Director of Consumer Engagement for the Center for Food Integrity and also President at Look East Consulting. It's easy to go through a person's bio, but the couple things that are most important about me, and I should say, raise your hand if this sounds like you, because there are multiple of us in here. Raised on a dairy farm in Minnesota, raise those, right? And now actively working in this organization that I'm privileged and blessed to serve. I'm a mom. I grew up in that agriculture world and now find myself living in suburbia, surrounded by people who really don't have context for or access to where their food comes from, and they have an abundance of questions. So it's a privilege to do the work that I do. In my role with the Center for Food Integrity, I focus on this mission every single day to build trust in the food system. We've heard sustainability, transparency, trust, oh my, all these things that we're working on all the time, and all of you who are working on to be able to check a box that the consumer or your customer is looking for. And so the work that we do focuses on what is it that the supply chain needs. We work all across with our 200 members and project supporters that span the full food system. So we work in agriculture with groups like National Pork Board and Dairy Management Inc., to tech providers like Pivot Bio. We have on our board Benson Hill, Corteva, to those groups that are in retail and food service, Kroger, Costco. All of these different people are playing a role on our board, even the World Wildlife Federation, so even NGOs. So our goal is to really span and think about the needs of the system, which is a series of interconnected gears, and when you change one gear, everything else has to pivot and move or change. We work on this, and we are really probably known best for the trust research that we do and that we started out with not that many years ago, about 15 years ago when the center was founded. And what we've been hearing throughout the day today is values matter, and that's what our trust research proved, peer-reviewed and published model that said values are important and so is science, but they're not created equally. So it's imperative to understand that values, that perception that we're alike, is 3 to 5 times more important than just having the facts. And I'll pause because it's this old baseline of just basic relationship building. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. It's Roosevelt, it's long old, but it's age old, and it works every time. Just a little bit of a highlight on some of our most recent research. We focused on Gen Z. These are those those 11 to 26-year-old-ish people that are coming into their power, into their buying power, into the marketplace, and they are definitely influencing what's going on, and they think differently. They're going to help us fundamentally reshape the way that we think as an industry, and all of the topics we've been talking about earlier today really help us think, get on the same page as them. I'm just going to pull these up and not spend a bunch of time going through all of the different data points here. I'll bring up a slide. We just published this brand new research in January of this year. We partnered with Costco, Tyson, and the American Farm Bureau to dig into our own bit of research. We do digital ethnography to help us understand what are the opportunities we have to engage with this generation. We did on-farm experience where we brought Gen Z farmers and Gen Z consumers together to understand what are those value connects. We ended up on a beef cattle operation in Texas near San Antonio. And what we found is that through a process of engaging with dietitians, with a chef, with a rancher, and with those in the food system who are absolutely these experts, we can really connect with this group, and the research pans out as well. The other opportunity to understand is that Gen Z is very much hiring food to do different jobs for them than just basic sustenance. And so we've heard these different themes. Again, I won't get tied into all of these different things, but at the end of the day, transparency is imperative because Gen Z, yes, they were born, they don't know life without a smartphone. Yes, they absolutely are going to communicate and maybe prefer some of that, channel-based communication, but imperative to understand about them is they want experiences that help them feel engaged, that feel that they get that backstage pass, that they have the opportunity to connect with true experts who can tell them the good, the bad, the ugly, not just the truth, but the whole truth, so that they don't feel duped. As I mentioned, we did a tour. You can scan the QR code and go to Best Food Facts to learn a bit more about what we did, see the videos that were created, both from those folks that were with us on the tour, as well as we put together. And I would just encourage you as well to understand there's an opportunity to really, really get excited about what's coming. Anytime we hear about change, people go, ooh, challenge. It feels different. It feels like we're going to have to get used to a new set of norms as it relates to a consumer group. But there's huge opportunity for us related to technology and innovation and sustainability, those areas where they're very focused, as long as we think first about them, or we think about them when we think about what we're trying to achieve. Because if we can say we're thinking about nutrition and sustainability for you and your generation, they're going to go, okay, I was a consideration. And if they can help me have a more nutritious product that's consistently available, that checks the boxes on sustainability and animal welfare and worker safety and then I can get behind this. This is where we win on things like gene editing and other technologies that are coming to market. I'll sit there.
All right.
Oh, no, you don't.
Let's fill the silence.
Yeah, you should be able just to click,
Just click.
hopefully. Or maybe start talking, maybe the slide.
Oh, maybe I'll just start talking. That's fine. I don't need slides. My name is Emily DeSousa. I am a fisheries scientist and science communicator. So this room is incredibly different from the rooms that I'm normally in and speaking in. And I can say that I've learned a lot already just in one day. I have a very different experience than I think the majority of you. I did not grow up on a dairy farm or anything even remotely close or have any idea about a lot of the things that you guys are talking about. And so thank you, firstly, for inviting me into this space because it's been very, very eye-opening. And I hope that I can share some of my experiences working in the seafood industry and with fishermen and water farmers, because I do think there are a lot of similarities and, of course, a lot of important collaborations necessary to feed the world and to form these sustainable food systems of the future. So a lot of what I do is focused on marketing and communications to Gen Z. So I am a scientist by training. I went to Canada's Food University, the University of Guelph. And what I found when I was there was that despite being called Canada's Food University and having hundreds of millions of dollars dedicated to food systems research, there was nobody working on seafood. And my family comes from the Azores Islands off of the coast of Portugal. So it's an archipelago of 9 tiny islands where seafood is everything. It's the economy, it's food security, and so I was really inspired to figure out where seafood fits into food systems, and again, how fishermen and water farmers and land-based farmers can work together to feed the world. While I was in grad school, however, I realized, I think what a lot of us in this room agree on, people have no idea where their food comes from. And seafood is definitely part of that equation. Seafood, I think, also presents a unique set of challenges in that for many people, the ocean is out of sight, out of mind. We can't go in and necessarily count all the fish one by one the way that you might be able to on a farm. And so there is this other layer of mystery and uncertainty, and people have no idea what lies beneath the surface, and so I wanted to change that. And so what I do today is I run a consulting and PR agency, as well as an influencer marketing brand. So I've heard a lot of people talk about influencers today, which is actually really cool. I feel like the seafood industry needs to talk about influencers as much as you guys are, but I am one of those influencers. And so I basically try to communicate the science of sustainable seafood online to Gen Z and millennials, because they are very curious. I think you had up in some of those slides that millennials right now are, I think, the most educated generation in the world, and Gen Z is coming up right behind them. They have questions that I don't even know that my parents would have thought to ask about our food. And so I am trying to break down those barriers and make it easier for people to access the scientific information and understand it in a way that makes them feel empowered and doesn't make them feel stupid, for a lack of a better word. People want to understand science, and they want to feel like they are a part of something, and they don't want to feel like they're being spoken at. They want to be spoken to. And so I have been using social media as a vehicle to communicate science with this younger generation because, as you mentioned, Gen Z lives on their phone, and I am on that Gen Z cusp, so I'm definitely guilty of this, and that's why I've realized it's a very effective tool for bringing science to the younger generations. And talk about a backstage pass. I mean, I wish that I could bring thousands of Gen Z and young people onto oyster farms and salmon farms and onto fishing vessels. It's not always possible, so the next best thing is to take them behind the scenes through social media. And so I found this type of content where I'm on an oyster farm showing people, here is how an oyster goes from this little spat to a full-grown oyster, and how it grows just like your fingernail, and here's how the different flavor profiles change based on the water quality. People are very intrigued and interested by this. And then, of course, Atlantic salmon is probably one of the biggest conversations being had in the seafood industry, especially where I'm from. Being a Canadian, it's a very big topic in Canada right now, and so there's a lot of opportunities to address science and misconceptions within this space as well. Again, going behind the scenes, showing people, here's what actually goes on in a farm, here are the people behind what you produce, and here's how it gets to your plate. And I'll just end off by saying social media, I think, is one of the most effective vehicles for communicating this, especially with the younger generation. I mean, we can argue about TikTok and whatnot at another time, but the reality is that there's 1 billion people on that platform, 1 million in the United States alone, and people are using social media not just as a means of connecting with people or staying in touch with their friends or doing trendy dance videos. Social media is where people get their news. It's where they get their information. When people want to learn something, they're going to TikTok. We used to talk about Google University, and anything you want to learn, you can just Google it. This generation is using TikTok. It's now TikTok University. If I want to learn a new recipe, or if I want to brush up on language skills or learn something online, I'm putting it into the TikTok search bar. I'm not searching it on Google. And I'll just end off by saying, in terms of science communication, it's obviously very fast and more timely than the traditional methods of academic publishing and the way that our scientific research normally comes out.
Oh, not yet. Okay. How do I go back? Okay, I don't actually have a poll question yet. I thought my slide would go up.
Yep, they're going to see it. So if everyone
Oh,
wants
are
to
we
plug
doing
their
it now? I
phones-
was going to do it at the end, but that's okay. We can do it now, because we're not even going to talk about it till later. So yes, there's going to be a poll. Good job. Good job, everybody. This is going to be important later. So my name is Cassidy Johnston. I have the backwards journey from Roxi. I grew up in a suburb of Denver, and I have an environmental studies degree from CU Boulder, so hippie degree, hippie school. It's one of my favorite things. And I'm a first-gen cattle rancher. I got into ranching in a funny way. I'm not going to tell you the whole story. It's very long. In college, and that's what I've done ever since with my whole adult life. My husband is also a first-gen rancher. He manages a large cow-calf operation outside of Denver. We've lived and worked on many large ranches in 3 different states together. We have 3 little boys. And as I've gone through my journey, ranching from being on the cowboy crew to data in the office, I'm also a bull and semen rep for a large seed stock producer, and then just being in this space as a brand new agriculture person, we don't communicate very well about what we do in this business, and lots of people are very, very curious. So I started my own consulting firm last year called Not Your Average Rancher, and my motto is that I serve in the gap between the ranch and the table, whatever that looks like. There are lots of people, as I'm sure you all know, in this space who are curious about what happens on farms and ranches. Obviously, my wheelhouse is ranching in the West. I always say that because I don't know anything about farming, friends. None. We're just ranching over here. And we once had a goat, I will say that, but it hated my oldest child, who was 2 at the time, so we didn't have that goat for very long. So what I do is I help various organizations, people, companies, ag tech understand the path that beef takes from the pasture to the plate, help them who are struggling with communicating with farmers and ranchers, help them build a network of farmers and ranchers if they are interested in that for their business. And my goal is to help keep ranchers ranching, and however that looks, and to help build a beef industry that we are proud of in the future. And the future, of course, is Gen Z, which leads us, and I'm not going to talk any more than that because we'll go into our questions, and here we go.
So Gen Z is not shy. We know that about them. And actually, over 60% have reached out to a brand over the past year asking for more information, asking questions of that brand, and oftentimes online. So how do you communicate complicated messages to Gen Z? We'll start here.
We have to start understanding that our climb to what we know and what we see, to the proverbial top of the mountain, is very different than what they have had exposure to. Analogies work really well, and that's why I'm going to give one right now. But when you think about what they know or understand or have exposure to or don't, it's going to be really hard to have that science-based conversation because we're going to fall into jargon, we're going to start to get frustrated, and maybe even with the initial question they ask, we're going to go, that's the best you've got. And the reality is, if I have to go in and explain to my mechanic what's going on with my car, I'm going to say, boop, boop, beep, boop. That's what it sounds like. That's the place they're coming from. It doesn't mean their question isn't good. It doesn't mean the perspective they bring isn't valid. It's just where they're starting from. So understand this mountain that we're standing on, we're actually back, when we talk about food and agriculture and what's going on, we're standing back to back with them. And we might be looking, there was the bus image I think that Ray used earlier, that, you know, the training that we've had, the shoes we bought, the mentors that helped us get to the top of it. We have, you know, climbed this beautiful grass-covered, easy pathway mountain to say we believe in, trust in, and have great promise about what's coming for the future of food. And they look at the mountaintop, or the mountain, you know, they scaled with bad shoes, no training, no mentorship, no access, no understanding of what they were getting to. It was snow-covered, it was windy. And they go, this is awful. And then we get back to the very beginning of the day. Now the food system's broken and we need to recreate it. So we have to start with where they are. And guess what? The first pathway is not to explain anything.
Emily?
That was my point. It's to do that. It's to stop talking and listen for the language they're using. This gets back to a theme we've heard throughout. What are the terms they're using? What are the values they're showing through their questions that can help us understand how we can help them? I'm nervous about. I can't imagine what goes on behind those, you know, in that environment. Do you really? I'm trying to make good decisions. Those are all indications that they're trying to help, you know, bring proper nutrition to their family. They don't know how to read labels, et cetera. So we have to first start with getting on their side of the fence, and it will be a win every time if we can educate ourselves about their side of the mountain before we try to turn them around to see our side of the mountain. We can get to educated consumers correcting misinformation, but if that's our initial goal, to be in that conversation, we've already lost.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll build on that a little bit because I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. But I think wherever you think they're starting from, probably take 10 steps back because, like you said, it's completely different. And I know that's hard when you're in this space every single day, and things that seem obvious to you will not be obvious to somebody else. And I think listening is a big part of that because I noticed this from my own experience doing the influencer content creation work on social media. The things that I thought people would want to know about seafood were very different from what they actually want. The questions that they had were very different from the content that I was initially creating. And the moment I took a second to just, stop creating content and just listen and read through the comments and see what they actually wanted to know, I realized it was very different from what I thought they wanted to hear. And then you can better serve and respond to those questions and actually provide value when you find out exactly what it is that they want. And I think this piece about values and science go hand in hand. Because the unfortunate reality is people don't really care about science unless it applies to their values. Like they need to know why should they care about this science. That's just the world that we live in. People don't act based on numbers and scientific fact. We see that in everything in society. They act based on values. And so I think finding out what's important to them, and then you can tie the science into the values and respond to the questions in a way that meets them where they're at.
Cassidy, we actually got an interesting question from the audience. So
Okay.
I'd like to ask you that question.
Okay.
So Gen Z represents the most diverse generation in history. And Gen Z makes up over 50% are non-Hispanic, non-white. So when we look at the agriculture community, this was a question from the audience, and we look, even around our room perhaps, and we look at farmers and ranchers, oftentimes in the United States, the Gen Z population may not see themselves reflected in the people who are producing their food. So how do we overcome that challenge? How do we connect with Gen Z and still be transparent and authentic in doing so?
You gave me the hard one. So I want to echo what Michelle said the last panel when we were talking about agriculture. We don't need to lead with agriculture. A lot of the time when I connect with people, I talk about being a mom or some pants that I found. Because if you're a female in the United States, you know the trouble of finding pants that fit everybody. And just stuff like that. Or I make sure that if I don't have like an actual formula, but if I've talked about cows a bunch, LinkedIn is where I live the most, I'm going to throw in a post about balance or motherhood struggle or a recipe or a weird meme. I don't know, just something to keep it light. So there's that we need to connect on a level other than food. We also, it's the same as we connect with just about everybody, you need to ask a lot of questions because when we're talking about communities that do not see themselves represented with us, I don't know their experience. So I need to ask a lot of questions to understand where they're coming from, what their concerns are. And the more questions you ask, I'm sure you guys have all experienced this, the questions people are asking may not actually really be what they're wondering about, but they don't know how to say it. They don't have the right words because this is not their wheelhouse. And so, and there's also a piece that isn't really related to what we're talking about. We need more funding for first-generation farmers and ranchers, and we need more funding for people who don't fit the normal model to get started in this industry. Two things I hear the most are we've always done it that way, and that will never work. Well, I am from Denver. I'm from suburbia. I took classes about why animal agriculture is wrong in college, and here I am today in front of you, and I live on a ranch with 1,100 cows. So, and a bottle calf named Ferdinand, who's the bane of my existence. However, he's very pushy, that Ferdinand. So I think we need to seek to connect and build relationships wherever possible. And I think we also need to talk more, when we hear of struggles and questions people have, I don't think we need to sit on them and hold them. I think we need to talk about them amongst ourselves, because there's going to be a lot of times in this area especially where I do not have the answer because it's not my experience. And I don't want to, kind of like if someone asks me a question about row crop farming, I am going to defer. I'm going to toss that ball to somebody else who can adequately catch it and answer that question. I think we can do that in this area too and call members of our community who should be raised up and amplified, and it's our job to increase the platform of the people that maybe we want to see more of and that look a little different, whether it's people of color, first gen, women, whatever it is, people who are growing a different thing. you know, because often we do have some crops and some things, commodities in this country that are a little more popular than others. You know, I have a friend who's a Christmas tree farmer. Like, I still think it's wild that she grows Christmas trees. Or like my friend who has a maple syrup plantation farm. I don't even know the right word, but they do the maple syrup thingy, and it's great. So I think just as a community, we can reach out to each other. We can reach out to people that we know are in this space and really help people understand that if we don't have the answer, we are listening to them, and just ask a lot of questions. That's always my default. If I don't have the answer, I just ask more questions, because then you prevent yourself from saying something really ridiculous,
Yeah, thank you, Cassidy. I think asking questions and being curious is like the cornerstone and listening. So Roxi, we talked a little bit about marketing in Gen Z. An interesting fun fact, so just this past month, Gen Zers, 80% of them purchased a product through social media, 80%. So let's talk about marketing with Gen Z. Have you had any examples, Roxi, or a specific case study where you can demonstrate and talk to the audience a little bit about marketing with Gen Z and what tactics can really work with that?
Sure. I'll start by saying what doesn't work. What's not enough is just to communicate. What's not enough is to have a binder with messages. Because to the point of dialogue being the key, if you've met one consumer, you've met one consumer, just like if you've met one farmer, you've met one farmer. Thank you, Dr. Leah Dorman, for telling me that many years ago, right? It's easy to assume. We say, here's our Gen Z research. We know this. Anybody that's in the research space, you know that you're trying to get generalized trends. But if you're trying to connect to market, know that for Gen Z, it better be a dialogue. Start the process of asking questions, listening thoughtfully, and asking more questions to understand more about where they're starting from. Ask questions about how they're using your products. A different way of thinking about framing as you go out into discovery and are trying to really get on the same page is, what jobs are they hiring my product to do for them? Because just to your point about jumping in, and these are the questions I thought they would want to have answered. We can't even imagine where they're coming in. And as I mentioned earlier, they're hiring food to do very different jobs for them. They're hiring food, and this is sort of a hangover of the pandemic. They're not thinking about just nutrition, just the impact of the double stuffed Oreos, right? They're thinking about, how does this impact me for years to come? Does this impact my ability to have children someday? Does this impact my children's disease instance? They're thinking about these things along with, how does this, choosing this product impact the planet? Were the people who harvested these plants, were they treated fairly? Those are the types of things. So before you jump out with your marketing messages, understand that you have a huge opportunity, and I would say PS, an obligation if you want to get it right, to actually ask them, how are they hiring your potential product or service, and what jobs is it that those are checking the box on?
Thank you. So Emily, we got a question from the audience for you as well. And being an influencer and on social media a lot, I just actually read an article that was in the Wall Street Journal, and it was talking about how this is the loneliest generation, and they have a lot of statistics to back it up. So being online and being in social, the question for you is, how do you kind of, when you get on TikTok and you're on social, how do you combat those perceptions and misinformation, and how do you really promote agriculture and use the science communication that you've talked about?
Yeah, I think it goes back to this idea of connecting with people through other means on a personal level. And I do that with my own social media. Gen Z is the generation of oversharing. So they want to see, I'm on the cusp of Gen Z, so I'm going to say we are nosy. I'm so intrigued by what does an average day in an influencer's life look like? What do they do? What time do they wake up? What do they make for, I want to know these things. I'm nosy, and other Gen Z want to know this too. And so I think bringing them in that way, like you were saying, Gen Z is the loneliest generation, and this is how we connect. They want to go and they want to watch 100 Instagram stories of their favorite influencer, literally just bringing them through the motions of their day. And I know that sounds horrifying to some people in this room, but that's what they want to feel like they're a part of your life, like they've stepped into your world. And this is something that I tell, the water farmers that I work with and the fishermen that I work with, like, just bring your iPhone out on the farm and just, hey guys, today we're out doing, and it's awkward to talk to your phone, okay? I'm like, that's never gonna go away. It's always gonna be there. But people wanna see it. They wanna see like a raw, uncut version of your life. Like, what does your day-to-day look like? They wanna see the parts that are related to food, related to agriculture. And then just the everyday like struggles of being a Gen Z or being a mom or like whatever it is. And so I think that finding ways to bring them into your everyday life outside of food is really, really powerful. Because I think also when you make it all about the science education or about talking about a specific product, it can be very salesy. Even if you're not selling a specific product, you're selling an idea or you're selling a belief. And again, Gen Z doesn't want to be talked at. They want to be talked to. And so just finding these ways to bring them into your life. And maybe, it's not as extreme as filming every single second of your life, but just finding ways to capture those genuine, raw, uncut moments that are less related to food, I think is really, really powerful. And like I said, they're nosy. So oversharing, you really can't overshare with Gen Z.
And Cassidy, you're a busy mom, rancher, also an advocate for agriculture. Do you want to share a little bit how you connect with people as well online?
Sure. I am terrible about doing exactly what you just said, even though I encourage my clients to do it too. I think, yes, Gen Z really they want a behind the scenes. They want transparency. And transparency looks a whole lot like come to the barn to feed my bottle calf with me. And I don't say the bane of my existence, Ferdinand. I say Ferdinand, the adorable bottle calf. And really they just want to know more. And like you said, there's no such thing as TMI, too much information. I would watch that. Deadliest Catch.
Exactly.
Like in reality shows, right? And so, and the beautiful thing about social, because sometimes I have clients that are like, I am not doing a dance on TikTok. And I'm like, good, me neither. Awesome, cool. You can choose what you share. Like you can really curate. That's why we call it the highlight reel, right? You can have a highlight reel of what you do every day. That doesn't mean that you should hide the hard things, the sad things. Like we had a bottle calf that did not make it because her mother didn't have any milk and she was dehydrated, and I shared how we needed to give her an IV, and I thought she probably wouldn't make it, and she didn't. And I explained why. And people were so fascinated to know, first of all, that my husband can do an IV in the barn. He's got a bag of saline and it's like hung up with twine, and he's sitting there with a needle, and they were like, I had no idea. And I'm like, yeah, we really care about our animals. And so also a good point is that when we are talking about sustainability, Americans especially see sustainability through the lens of animal welfare. So as animal agriculturalists, we need to share about the animal welfare component, what we are doing on our farms and ranches to care for our animals. Because that's just how our audience understands this, and that goes to Gen Z. And we also have to really keep in mind what misconceptions are out there that we can answer with behind the scenes videos. Like when people say, oh gosh, like 1,100 cows, that's way too many cows. There's no way these cows are okay. So we go out and I show them vast quantities of hopefully green when I get home grass, and cows that are just chilling out. I almost sang the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air song, but I won't because that's not this generation. And so have a really good idea of what the misconceptions are and how you can just answer that with a video, a story, a clip. You don't even have to, and then you can go into sharing the science later maybe, but kind of back up the science with your phone that says, actually, no, calves are not born in feed yards. They are born on farms and ranches like mine. Selfie, calf, done. And that goes a long way to helping open the door to share science and share answers to misinformation without being salesy. Because do you know how many times I get accused of being in the pocket of big ag? And I'm like, where is my check? Children are expensive. I have yet to receive this check for being in this pocket. A lot of consumers don't understand how our industry works. So if we can just show them, a picture's worth 1,000 words. I don't know how many words a TikTok is worth, like 1 million maybe. So that's the best way, is to show what you want to in a way that's like, come along with me. Just take people along as much or as little as you want, essentially.
And we've heard a lot today about sustainability and how important sustainability is. And for this generation, it's absolutely crucial. In fact, 64% of Gen Z, they say they will make a purchasing decision based on sustainability and the brand communicating what they're doing from a sustainability perspective. So Roxi, from a marketing perspective, and when people are kind of looking to kind of communicate, one of the questions we got from the audience was, how do you communicate that message to a Gen Z, but then not alienate a boomer, right, or Gen X? Yes, they're 26% of the population, but we still have 20% of the population that's all these other different generations. So how are we going to market to Gen Z without alienating others?
Yeah. We at the Center for Food Integrity, our definition of sustainability is really a framing. And this is something that I think can be leveraged for everybody here, independent of what role you serve or what seat you sit in. We see a sustainable system, a sustainable company, a sustainable operation as one that is first grounded in values. So identify who you are and what's important to you, because once you've identified your values, then you can start to prioritize really easy. Walt Disney's nephew said it's really easy to make decisions once you know what your values are. So start there. Once then you're grounded in ethics and you know what's important, then you have to validate through science. We have to be able to verify that what we say is the right thing to do at the base of the triangle. Then we start to actually say, and we can prove that this is the right thing. That's going to allow you to say, what are the metrics that are actually relevant to this piece of land versus that, or this barn versus that? Right? So once you then verify through science, then you have to ask that other question. And this came up in somebody else's panel. How do we bring in the economic side of sustainability? Because guess what? If you don't have profit, you don't exist as a business, and that's not sustainable either. We can't be in a position where we feel like we have to apologize for being profitable, but if it's our only message point, that will get us in trouble. And this is my opinion, but ESG is a really focused area for our investor community, VCs, et cetera. Maybe it's because they've been come at because all they're focused on is profitability. We can be a really stronghold to say, yes, profitability matters, but it also has to pan out based on the metrics that we track, that we can validate are the right thing to do based on our ethics. And we do have a framework called Optimizing Sustainability. It's a free download for you. It's a 3-module course to go through and set values and prioritize them. Identify and assess those trade-offs, because guess what? Nobody lives in sparkling unicorn and rainbows land. We don't ever have easy situations that we're trying to make decisions around. But once you have your priorities, you have a method through which you can evaluate and make decisions around those trade-offs. And then finally, there's information, assets, and recommendations for how you can communicate those out. At the end of the day, that's how you communicate in a way that says, here's what we care about, that's going to suit the needs of a multitude of generations of consumers.
Thank you. So we have about 2 minutes left, so I want to ask a question of the entire panel. And if you know the movie, the phrase is always be closing. Alec Baldwin's character talks about always be closing. And not only do we always need to be closing, we need to always be closing our communication and having calls to action and kind of closing that loop when we're engaging and having conversations. So what would be your kind of last thing that you would want to say, and how do you close those conversations? And what's your CTA when you're engaging with, especially Gen Z, but consumers in general? Let's start with Cassidy.
So this isn't, I'm going to try not to get woofy about this. We know that consumers in general, but especially younger consumers, want to hear from farmers and ranchers directly. They want to know about the beginning of their food system. And we have been talking about this for 10 or more years. We, as farmers and ranchers, need your help. We cannot raise our hands and say, hey, gigantic companies, hire me, please. We don't have those resources. So if you are looking for a way to connect better with any generation, younger generations, whatever, you need to have farmers and ranchers on your team to help communicate your message and help connect one end of the supply chain to the other. If you are interested in something like this, the farming and ranching industry, as we've talked about, is very small. We can all help connect you to people who are interested in this. If one of your concerns is that, well, no media training, we'll provide it. As a rancher, I'm really, really tired of hearing this because we want to help. But individually, we don't have the platform, we don't have the volume, we don't have the time to amplify our own messages beyond a few really successful influencers who, and this is not you, tend to preach to the choir. And that's not what we need anymore. We gotta get outside our own industry, and we need the other end of the supply chain to help us as farmers and ranchers with that. So that's my call to action. If you know you need to have farmers and ranchers helping you market your products, get you some. Seriously, like, get after it, because we want to help and we want to be a partner in the future of our own industry, which includes our customer. But at the very beginning of the process, we don't have access to our customers. My customer is my calf buyer on the ranch. That's who my customer is. So we would love your help in connecting us to the other end, and it'll be beneficial for you too, because that's, you know, they don't want to see us because we're like really good looking. They want to see us because we are the experts in how food is grown, and we want to share that and not talk to. We want to visit, you know?
Thank you. Emily?
Yeah, I mean, I will echo that. I think like getting this content online available to Gen Z in whatever form works for you. Like you said, maybe it's not documenting, you know, right from the moment you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning or something like that. You pick and choose. But I mean, I'm personally curious. Like, I have no idea what a day on a cattle ranch looks like. Like, that is so, and I'm in the food industry, and it's still so beyond my scope. And I would watch that TikTok. I would love to know like what your day-to-day looks like what goes on these farms, how my beef is getting to me. And I know that there are a lot of other consumers who are also interested, because I see it online. I see it with seafood. And so I think that there's an appetite, pun intended, for this type of content. And so I think not being afraid to get it out there also. Like I said, like, this is the generation of oversharing. They want a level of transparency that I don't think has existed in the food industry generally. And I think it could be really disruptive to provide that. And yeah, like I said, there's no such thing as oversharing. And if you feel like you have, the good thing is that the internet moves so quickly. So whatever embarrassing thing that you do will be very quickly forgotten tomorrow. So you can sleep well knowing that.
Yeah, and I'll say we've heard multiple people say, just start. We've also heard people say, go to them and start where they are. And I would encourage you, wherever you feel you can start talking, you have an audience. So even if you're not going to sign up for TikTok or do the dance or do those things, there is an audience, and you being I think we said 1.5% of people who are directly connected to production agriculture, you are like an exotic animal that people have so many questions about. I would also encourage you, start where you're at, be open to feeling vulnerable. Lots of really great things have happened when people have been willing to put themselves in a position where there's a little bit of discomfort. And then the last thing I'll say is try to stop shutting down, you know, people's lack of education about what you do and how you've spent your life and dedicated your career to get to the position and the seat you're in right now. If we can stop saying no and start saying yes if or yes when, then we can really frame up conversations in a different way, so that, you know, when consumers say we need to do this way, or the food system is broken, so we need to, instead of going no, you're wrong, you can go yes, if we only look at it and consider that one thing that's really on the top of your mind. So think about that framing, and it helps us be less defensive, which is easy, and validated. Be vulnerable, and then just start.